perhaps the most complex time in human history. It's a time of great complexity. Yeah. A time of great complexity. A time of great instability. But as a result of that, it's, most people would say, the time of greatest possibility and opportunity. So as a young adult beginning to build his or her life at this point in time, it's essential that you own certain things so that rather than you being a victim of the instability or a loser in the complexity, you become a champion and you become a giant and you become a spokesperson of all the powerful things that are. What we'd like to talk about today are just a few core things that have been fashioned and owned by young men and women, largely in the state of Israel, building from the most recent destruction, the Holocaust destruction, our Khurban of modern day, to stand proudly as Jews have never stood before. And to the extent that we can take those core ideas and build with them, we will have also built from the greatest destruction of Jewish history to the greatest moment in Jewish history. We will become contributors to this remarkable movement that's going on in Judaism right now. And most importantly, we will be fulfilled, happy, and successful. So what I want to do in the time we have is highlight some of the things that we've learned in the last 40 years or so that enable young men and women in the state of Israel to be remarkable. We have a remarkable army, the most moral and most successful army in human history. We have a remarkable tech sector, the most successful in human history. We have a remarkable resilience within the people, where I'm sitting in a cab last year this time, and the missiles are falling in Tel Aviv, and the Russian immigrant cab driver who's barely making a living is talking about his love of life. He has a love of life that's greater than most of us here. We have a remarkable situation there in that people are happier there in a country that is the most threatened country in the world than they are here, the most secure country in the world. How is it possible? What did they build from the ashes of our most recent destruction that we haven't yet built? How is it possible that with the stress and the strain that are the biggest killers in America, that stress and strain being that much greater over there, that people live longer over there on average? We never got missiles flying over our heads over here. We don't have children running into bomb shelters in shock, crying because they had 15 seconds to react to the bomb flying over their heads. I saw it. I was standing in Tel Aviv a year ago this time. It's surreal. When the missile flies through the air and is met by the Iron Dome missile, the whole thing is surreal. Because you know, if it wasn't met by that counter missile, you and everybody around you would have been very seriously hurt, or worse. How is it possible that a generation of people are so optimistic that per capita they're having more children than any other Western country in the world? How is it possible? Aren't they killing you? Aren't they killing you just because and for no reason? So what is it? What did you build from the Khurban from the latest destruction that we can mimic, that we can inherit, that we can champion as you champion it. And that's what I'd like to touch on in the time we have today. Good? Good. There are three essential things that I believe have been largely mastered. And by the way, nothing's perfect over there. Certainly not. And we're not trying to project this idealistic X. That doesn't exist by design. It's not supposed to be there. But let's talk about those core things. If I woke one of you up in the middle of the night and I asked you, give me the 3 or 4 things in one word, one sentence, the 3 or 4 things that you believe in no matter what. Shook you in the middle of the night and woke you up and said, tell me, what do you believe in no matter what? What is a principle that you will, with all the best of your ability, never budge on? What would you say?
Believe in God.
Believe in God. What would you say?
That was mine.
That was yours. What would you say?
Yeah, I'd say Judaism.
Huh?
Judaism.
Judaism. What would you say?
Torah.
Torah. What would you say?
Helping one another.
Helping another. What would you say?
Being alive, valuing life. Probably life.
Life. Great. What would you say?
Family?
Family. Excellent.
I would say sleep.
Sleep. So you wouldn't have been happy that I woke you up to begin.
I wouldn't be
Right.
able to think rationally.
I'm sorry?
I wouldn't be able to think rationally.
You wouldn't be able to think rationally. You'd want me to leave you alone. Okay. Wide awake. If you're wide awake, what would you say?
Oh. Judaism and family.
Judaism and family. So I'm going to push back a little bit and tell you that whereas Torah, Judaism, family, God are all very real, obviously, and beautiful things, but I need you to be a little tighter, a little narrower. So if I came over to you first thing in the morning and I asked you, what do you believe in no matter what?
The sun will rise.
I'm sorry?
The sun will rise.
This time?
The sun will rise.
The sun will rise. Okay, what do you believe in? What's your immovable principle?
The sanctity of life and humanity.
Humanity, sanctity of life. Good. Yeah?
I would say Hashem is one.
God is one. Good. Why is it important to have, let's say, 5 immovable principles? Why is it important if someone shakes you in the middle of the night and says, tell me, Ricky, what are those 5 things that the absolute best of your ability you will not budge on? Why is that important? Why?
Because it defines who you are.
Because it defines who I am. And what if I don't have those things? Then what?
Easily swayed.
I'm easily swayed, and what else? I don't have those 5 core defining things then?
It's perfect. Rabbi Joy just spoke about then you don't have context.
Then I don't have context, and what else don't I have?
You don't have an internal thing that defines you.
I don't have an internal compass that defines me, and I don't have an identity, and therefore what?
No purpose.
I don't have a clear purpose, and therefore what?
No direction.
I don't have a great direction, and therefore what?
You're not going to get to your goal.
I'm not going to get to my goal, and what else?
You are not you.
I don't know what me is, right? And?
You die.
Huh? I hope not. I'm not that crazy. And I'm not very happy. I'm not very happy. Right? And if I'm not very happy, then what? Then what? If I'm not very happy, then what? Why is the word simcha mentioned more times in the Torah than the word Shabbat? Why is simcha a core value in a legal and ethical system? Who cares if you're happy? Why should the Torah care? Do the right thing, listen to God, build a relationship, and keep going. Why is happiness a core value for all of us? Why? It defines or it does what? Yeah. It motivates me. It inspires me. It empowers me, right? So, it works in an interesting way. And this is a review for all of you, I'm sure. It works in an interesting way. I need to identify those 5 things that I care about, and those are my immovable principles. Doesn't mean life is going to be perfect and that I won't have to accommodate the world as it is sometimes and break a principle. I will, by design. God wants us to be challenged to the core sometimes. But then I'm going to fight my way back, and I'm going to put that pole back in the sand, and I'm going to say, I'm back to whom I want to be. So, as a young man, as a young lady, I've got to take some time and say, what are those things that are immovably mine, that I care about no matter what? That if someone is willing, excuse the simplistic a metaphor, but if someone is willing to write me a check for $1 million or $10 million, I don't move off this point. What is it? And if you have them, you have extraordinary power. You have presence. You have clarity. More important than anything, you're happy. You can make a decision based on a sense of stability. We ask him every day, allow me to feel stable and strong and secure. Okay, it starts with, well, who am I? What defines me? What is it that I'm going to fight real hard in my life to maintain, no matter what they throw at me? Now, when I do it, and the take home on this is very straightforward. I take out my smartphones, and I list the 5 things that define me as a person. They might change. Doesn't matter. But today, that's who I am. And they become my framework for life, for how I build my day, for how I approach my world. Now I have a sense of clarity about me. If I don't know who I am, I'm bouncing here, I'm being pushed over there, I'm trying a little of this, I'm hanging out with some of that, I'm attracted to this kind of person, I'm attracted to that kind of person, I'm chasing this career opportunity, I'm giving up that one, I'm falling in love with someone who doesn't make any sense for me. I'm not happy. But if I know who I am because I've taken the time to say, I believe in A, B, C, D, and E, and I'm going to do my very best never to forsake those things, I'm in a very different place. I have that extraordinary tool, that most powerful tool, which is joyfulness, happiness. Nothing is more powerful than that. Nothing is a greater enabler. And I have that partner to it, which is clarity. Clarity. I know what I want. It may change. E might come off the list in 3 months. But it doesn't matter. That list is sacred. That list is me. So, when I look at the greatest Jewish revival of all time, as it's exemplarized in this beautiful country, that we want to take and be a part of it, I look at some of the key things. It's not everybody in that country who has 5 immovable principles, but it's many, many people. People who are young and people who are not young, who have staked a claim in life about the things that they care about, and they're willing to give it all up for. We don't have that. We've never been challenged that way. We've never been posited the question, what are you willing to give it all up for? I was in the Old City a couple of weeks ago looking at an apartment in Jerusalem. And I met a woman probably around 70 years old. White skin, beautiful blue eyes. And she moved into the Old City about 40 years ago, just a few years after Jerusalem had been reunited. And she built her family in this little apartment. And now she was alone in that apartment. Her husband had passed. Her children had moved out. But looking in her eyes, I was humbled by her because I understood that she, as a young woman, had articulated immovable principles, core values, things she was willing to sacrifice everything for, and she actually did it. She did it. She acted on it. So she has a richness in her life. She has a power about her presence that many people will never have. She staked the claim, and she stepped up and did it. So, as young men and women, and as people not so young, facing this remarkable world that we live in, looking at its complexities and challenges, and therefore its opportunities, it all starts with me. Beni uben atzmi, between me and me. Who am I? Take a few minutes later today, next week, tomorrow, write down the 5 immovable principles that you have, that you will absolutely commit yourself to. Every Monday, put a reminder on your phone, every Monday morning, to read them again. Read them again. So as your week starts, you're reminded who you are and how you're going to build. You will be challenged on those things by design. HaKadosh Baruch Hu will send you very harsh life situations where you will be challenged to the core, like all the great Jewish men and women were, particularly Avraham Avinu, challenged to the core. Challenged to the core. Everything was to be trashed, but Akedat Yitzchak. You will be challenged as well, God willing. And when you're challenged and you come through, you stand taller than you had before. So, step 1. We want to build from the Churban, the 20th century Churban. We want to take advantage of the 21st century possibility, which to me shouts the greatest period ever in Jewish history. We're young men and women who can A, be a part of that in a collective way, and by doing so, grow so much each day ourselves. We have to first understand who we are and articulate those principles. Okay, so far? Good. Questions, thoughts? Everybody all right? Yes.
I don't understand how to come up with those 5 principles. Can you give examples?
Yeah. Okay, so let's take some examples from here. Let's take some examples. Rabbi?
I said before the Torah.
Torah. That's an example. Okay, good. What else? You have another example?
Am Yisrael.
Am Yisrael. Good. 2 examples. Do you buy into either of those?
What does that have to do with me?
Okay, so why don't those work for you?
I don't know. Is that something that my life is over?
Okay.
I don't know.
But his is. He's made he's staked a claim in his life, right? Would you do everything? Would you put everything on the line for those things?
Yeah,
You would?
I think so.
Okay. What would you put everything on the line for?
My family.
Okay, so you got number 1. What else?
Like, I know one of yours is being a perpetual student,
Mm-hmm.
but does that mean you're going to put everything on the line
I don't know. I would.
if you're not?
I read, Elie Wiesel wrote something very beautiful that I read last week. He wrote that for a Jewish person, hell is a reality with no books. For a Jewish person, hell is a reality with no books. Because many people love knowledge, but we're the people of the book. We're the people who chase knowledge. And so for me, yes, that would be one of my 5 principles, yes. So now you got one of his, one of mine. What's one of yours? You have family, what else?
I'll get back to you.
Family, what else?
Curiosity.
Great, that's a core value. How do we know curiosity is the core value? Who is the most curious of all men?
Abraham.
No?
Shlomo.
By the way, great answer. Abraham is a great answer. Who is more curious than Abraham?
Shlomo.
No? Could have been Shlomo. Excellent answer. Who is the most curious?
Einstein.
Moshe was the most curious. What'd you say? Einstein. Could be. When you mentioned giants, right? Shlomo, Abraham, Einstein, Moshe Rabbeinu. By the way, there's a common factor in all these men, and it more than likely was curiosity. How do we know that? How do we know that they each probably had a core value of curiosity? How do we know that?
Moshe with the Sinai, he went up to see what's going on, why is it not burning?
Right?
And he learned a very important lesson and changed the entire course of human history.
Good.
That one encounter.
Good. And?
Abraham was raised with like false gods and multiple gods.
Right. He was the searcher, right? Good. How else do we know? It goes like this. Smart people are curious people. So the term anav is often translated not to humble. Moshe was not humble in terms of being meek. He was anav, which means curious. So the smartest people are the most curious people. And that's a great virtue. It's a great value. So curious is an excellent choice, in my opinion. What else? Give me one or two others. Yes.
Tikkun olam.
Tikkun olam. Good. Yes.
I actually have a question. You brought up Abraham, curiosity as being a core value, but can't that be something that's in tension with the whole concept of having a list of principles? Like if Terah, conducted this exercise that we're having with Abraham, and Abraham said, my religion, which is idols, that he would never have gone on to smash those idols.
Right.
So there has to be an element of not just, holding things necessarily that I can never question them.
You're saying so curiosity guts the other four.
It's a very important thing.
And I'll tell you what, it might challenge the other four, and that's a good thing. Because they can change. But they have to be there, but they can change. And it might challenge the other four, and you might change 2 or 3 or 4 or all 5 at some point. But you have to have them. Even if they're different than the ones you had last year. Yeah.
But I think most importantly what you said is that they can change, right?
Yep.
Because originally when you were talking about the 5 principles, it almost seemed like you kind of have these values that you define for yourself and you live your whole life by them, but they can change, every day.
They can change.
But
But
the
when I can
important
make a
thing is-
commitment, it's
Right.
an absolute commitment. Yeah.
I think when it comes to Moshe's anava, I heard Rabbi Dweck once say that anava comes from la'anot, which is to answer. And he answered every situation. He was open to the situations rather than being self-absorbed and closed off to the situations. So that's what really made him curious as a result.
Nice. Very nice. Good. Yes.
If you can change your values, aren't they not strong values? I mean, if I have values today and new ones tomorrow, what are they?
Yeah, if I'm flippant with the values, you're right. But if there's something that comes into my life and I understand as a result of that experience that the value has to move from A to B, and I'm going to think about it seriously and carefully and change, that's valid. Good. Yes.
I would say honesty. Like honesty
Okay.
and truth.
Good.
Is a value.
Excellent. So that's one of yours. Good. Yes?
Ultimate goal of contentment.
Contentment? Good.
Contentment.
Contentment. Nice. I think there's one other one that people should consider. I think it's one of the most challenging in life, and that's loyalty. Ne'emanut. Nasata v'natata ve'emunah. Doesn't mean did you do it faithfully. It means did you do it loyally? Were you a loyal person? Those of you who just sat in Rabbi Dweck's class might have picked up this as one of the messages. Loyalty to God. Loyalty to a cause. Loyalty to another person. Very, very challenging. To be loyal is very, very challenging. And that might be a core value as well. Good? We'll move on to number 2. Beyond the immovable principles, then there are things I care about deeply. Things I care about deeply. Some of us have talked about this. But over here, I've got to do the following. I have to highlight the key areas in life the 4 key areas in life. I'm going to talk about them now. And within those 4 key areas, I've got to set a great possibility. These are the things I care about. Now I understand who I am. Now I want to take the next step and begin to build my dreams and possibilities. So I identify the 4 key areas of life, and within each of those key areas, I choose 1 of 2 commitments. So let's list the 4 areas and take an example. The 4 areas are the intellectual side of life, the spiritual, the emotional, and the practical or career. Intellectual, spiritual, emotional, and practical. These are the things that HaKadosh Baruch Hu built us with. The 4 key areas of the neshama that fulfill us. So, let's start with the intellectual. We go to school, we take classes, but this is one of those areas in life that builds me, that fulfills me. So, once a month, I need to ask myself the following question. I understand my intellectual reality. I understand that I go to school, that I'm in college, that I'm doing X. But if I can do anything I wanted to do intellectually, if I can engage anything I wanted to engage intellectually, what would that be? What would I do? Why? What's the power to that? What's the point of that?
To understand how you want to progress.
And in what respect?
Education. How you
Intellectually,
want to live
right?
in the world.
How I want to grow intellectually. What do many of us do intellectually? What do we do? If we're in college, we're in a structure. We're learning as we need to. If we're out of college, we might be reading some of the things relevant to what we do for a living. But most of us, mentioned it a few minutes ago, most of us begin to shrink intellectually once we're outside of a formal educational structure. Many of us aren't really growing intellectually even when we're in a formal educational structure because we're doing what we need to get done. We're not growing from it. So the second segment of how a person becomes a powerhouse is to articulate something key in each of these areas. In the world of intellect, what do I want to learn about? What inspires me? What will make me wake up in the morning and feel rejuvenated? That's a key component of a human being. And by the way, you don't need more than 10 minutes a day on that. But there's a dramatic difference between the person who commits that 10 minutes a day, it should be more, and the person who doesn't. What's the difference?
They have direction in their life.
You have direction and, yeah, what do you say? Yeah, what else do you have? Yes?
Strong foundation.
A strong foundation. What else do you have?
Knowledge.
Knowledge. What's more powerful than knowledge? Nothing. What else do you have?
Happiness.
Huh?
Happiness.
It's fulfilling, right? What else?
Purpose.
An impetus to learn.
An impetus to learn. And what else? It goes like this. I want to be studying something that I don't know, and that's challenging for me to understand, right? So if I've mastered X areas of math, for example, and I know them cold, I want to move up to that next area, which I don't know, and ideally, I have a very hard time understanding. Ideally, if I spend 10 minutes or an hour, when I first begin to build that, maybe 30% of the time, I understand what I did. And the rest of the time, I don't. I didn't. Why is that valuable? In the beginning, why?
You're out of your comfort zone.
Beautiful. I'm out of my comfort zone. And Jack, what?
You'll come back and you'll end up learning.
I'll learn more, but what else? What am I doing?
Building a foundation.
I'm building my foundation and I'm stretching the muscle. I'm not only amassing more knowledge, but I'm stretching the brain muscle to be able to internalize more complex knowledge. So I'm growing vertically and horizontally. This is essential to me as a human being. It's essential to us as Jewish people. It's no surprise that Israel is per capita one of the most successful countries in the world when it comes to post-university education, with all the challenges and with all the people leaving because it's hard to make a living. It's a phenomenon. In Judaism, we have an interesting term. We call an 85-year-old rabbi who might be a gadol hador, what do we call him? A talmid chacham. How absurd is that? The man's 85. He's one of the generation giants. He's still a student? How is that possible? But that's the whole story. So, after we articulate our immovable principles, we go to the 4 key areas of life. The first being the intellectual side of the human being. And we say, okay, I'm doing my thing. But what's my great goal here? What's my great possibility? If I could do anything in this area, what would I do? And I articulate a horizon for myself. For those of us who are doing Mishnayot, it's Gemara. For those who are doing Gemara, it's maybe Rashit Tosafot, maybe it's Rishonim, maybe it's philosophy, maybe it's wine tasting, the depth of understanding, how you distinguish between great wines and otherwise. It doesn't matter what it is. Ideally, it's Torah-oriented, at least part of the time. But it's something where I'm building, growing intellectually, amassing knowledge, and stretching the muscle so that I can amass more and more complex knowledge. I'm at a different point in my life than you are. I look around and I see a lot of people who have been standing still for 40 years. I see people who went to college with me and they've done nothing since. We know that Judaism articulates a very important point, and that is that there's no such thing as neutral in life. When it comes to personal growth and development, you're either growing or you're shrinking. Good. Spiritual. What's the story in the spiritual area? What do I want to be doing in this area? Questioning and good. And yes?
Interacting with God.
Interacting, good. What else? In the spiritual area, I also want to set a great possibility for myself. A great goal. I don't want to be stagnant. I keep Shabbat. I love God. I love mitzvot. I do chesed. Great. Am I growing? Am I moving? If I look from this Tish'a BeAb to last Tish'a BeAb, can I quantify a dimension in me spiritually where I've grown, I've become more? If I haven't become more, I've become less. And when Rabbi Dweck talks about this relationship, this love relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's an overarching thing that's lived each day in practical expression. In practical expression. So, I'm here spiritually. There's no limit to where I can be spiritually. In terms of the love and relationship with God, in terms of the understanding of mitzvot, in terms of the commitment and involvement in chesed, what am I doing? How am I growing? If I'm not growing, I'm shrinking. Let's pause for a second. Ricky 1. Never articulated the immovable principles. Good person. Never articulated his immovable principles. And didn't think about these 2 of the 4 issues. Didn't think about growing intellectually every day and growing spiritually every day. But as a good person, plugged in the system, community member. Ricky 2 articulated his 5 immovable principles. Set a great possibility that may take years to achieve intellectually, but is in it 10, 15, 20 minutes, an hour a day. Continues once a month to look out where he is spiritually and writes a new paradigm, a new goal, a new possibility. What's the difference when these 2 people wake up in the morning? What's the difference?
One of them is happy, one's not.
One of them is probably a lot happier than the other, and
One has a goal, one doesn't.
one is driven, yes.
One is mindful.
One is mindful. Good. What else? Yes. Albert.
One needs a self-aware lifestyle.
One leads a self-aware lifestyle. Excellent. Yes.
One is more self-actualized.
One is more self-actualized. Good. Now, on a personal level, finding that forever love, building that true, happy, and complete life. Who's going to be more successful? The second one, obviously. On a professional level, there will be a difference when two people walk into the room. When Ricky 1 and Ricky 2 walk into a room for a job interview or to do a presentation to buyers or to investors or to whatever, there will be a difference, even if they say the same words. The words that come out of Ricky 2's mouth, his presence, his charisma, his power, will be dramatically different relative to Ricky 1. And there's a lot of people out there doing a lot of the same thing. And you got to scratch your head sometimes and wonder why person B won someone's confidence and person A did not. And that's because their presence has great power. Okay, so far? Thoughts, questions? Area number 3, the emotional area. What's the story in the emotional area? What great possibility or great goal can I reach for in that area? What would be an example?
Understanding other people.
Understanding other people. Would it be that broad? Good, but could it be even more direct? Yeah.
Personal relationship.
Huh? Personal relationship. Could be understanding other people in general. Could be building a specific personal relationship. Yeah.
Compassion.
It could be becoming more compassionate. What's essential in this area? What is essential in this area? If I want to be growing emotionally, yeah.
Emotional stability.
Emotional stability and introspection, great, and putting myself in another person's shoes, and clarity, and communication, and
Being content with yourself.
yes, come on, and
Recognizing the bigger picture.
what's that?
Recognizing
the picture. What else? What else? Happiness. What else? Self-awareness. What else? Confidence. Good. What does confidence give birth to? What does confidence give birth to? What does it empower? What does it enable? Confidence gives you what? It gives you what?
A drive or passion.
It gives you a drive and passion, and it gives you the opportunity to be vulnerable. It gives you the confidence to be vulnerable. Why is vulnerability so important?
So you can fix yourself.
So I can fix myself. So I can really open up to another person. So I can give him myself, so I can trust, so I can connect. If I become cynical, if I don't know how to be vulnerable to trust, I become very much alone. It's a very sad place to be. So vulnerability is essential. So in category 3 of the 4 categories, we have to ask ourselves the following. Am I growing emotionally? Now I have a plan to grow intellectually. I have a plan to grow spiritually. And what am I doing emotionally? Am I on cruise control with my family? Am I on cruise control with my friends or in a relationship that I care about very much? Or do I have a plan to build the love that's shared? If I've had a tense situation with a group of people, how am I planning to fix that? How am I going to be vulnerable? How am I going to put myself on the line a little bit? Vulnerability is a very, very core Jewish value. I've got to be willing to be hurt. Because if I'm not willing to be hurt, I'm not going to be willing to grow. So, once a month, open up my smartphone. Look at area number 3, the area of emotion. Have I grown emotionally in the last month? What can I quantify? Am I laughing more with the person I love? Am I building a deeper relationship with this person? Am I closer to my friends? Do I have more friends? Have I broadened my possibilities emotionally? Or am I in the same place I was in 30 days ago? Nothing stands still. If I'm not growing, I'm shrinking. If I'm not loving more, I'm loving less. If I'm not connecting more, I'm connecting less. Ricky 1, Ricky 2. Ricky 1's not plugged into any of these. Ricky 2 is. I think it's beginning to become very clear that the person who walks into the room in the morning, the person who's dating another person, the person who's going for an interview, the person who's pitching something, any of the above and all of the above is a dramatically different exchange with Ricky 2. Because that person is in a different place, has a different level of confidence, of magnetism, of charisma, of interpersonal power. And it all comes from being at peace, being energized, being fulfilled. The last area is the career or practical area. And here it's no less important, and it goes like this. I have a job, or I have a college track to go in a certain direction. I'm going to get there. I want to be a social worker. I want to be a banker. I want to be a real estate broker. I want to be an engineer. I want to be whatever I want to be. And I've set up my practical platform to get there. Or I'm already working in that venue. So what do many people do? They say, okay, look, I'm doing what I'm doing, and it's important, and maybe I'll get promoted in a year. Or maybe I'll reach a different position, or maybe I'll take this on the road in a small way in 6 months or 2 years from now. And that's all has value. That means I'm working within the general confines of reality and targeting the possible growth that may come from the general experience that a person has in his or her career. That's fine, but it doesn't shout a lot, and it doesn't lead to much. Same thing has to happen here. I'm in the real estate business, for example. I'm doing X. If I do real well over the next 3 or 4 years, it's going to grow to 1.2x, 1.5x. And by the way, by most people's standards, that's a real success. And it is. But that's not how we build it. The way we build it is we say, I'm operating well within my reality. But if I could reach beyond the reality and ignore it completely, if I didn't have to be constricted by this reality, what would I do? What would I want? How would I get there? So what do you have here? Let's say you have 2 people, same 2 people. Say immovable principles, both cases. Intellectual, spiritual, emotional growth, both cases, right? On the program. Nothing happening in this area. Person A would just move with things and just grow as opportunities came up. Person B is challenging life, demanding its possibilities, out there, oftentimes alone, sometimes afraid, but breaking one glass ceiling after another, understanding that every setback was a fabulous gift that gave me lessons to learn to move my fantastic goals that much higher, to make them that much more unrealistic, seemingly unreasonable. That's what we want. That's what we essentially want in each area. We want to set goals and possibilities that when we first articulate them, they don't seem to make any sense. They're too big. They're too great. They're too high. And then what happens? You knock them off one after the other. How dare 6 million, 7 million Jews in a little tiny country, much smaller than the state of New Jersey, forget about the United States of America, forget about another sovereign nation. How is it possible? How is the achievement possible? It's possible because we're forced to think way beyond the present day reality. It's Megillat Esther day in and day out. I've got to chuck reality just for a handful of minutes at least, every couple weeks or so, and set a great possibility. And then, by the way, I step back into my reality and I put together a plan to make it happen. I always achieve unrealistic goals, seemingly impossible dreams and hopes, with a practical plan to get there. So, I'm in the real estate business, and I've become a broker, and I brokered my first deal, and I made $20,000, and last year I made $0. That's a great achievement. And if I continue working this way next year, if I really am super good at what I do, I'll make $50,000 or $100,000, whatever the numbers are. But when I make that 20 or that 50, I should be thinking of, how do I make $1 million? How do I make $10 million? It's not about the money. Not about the money. It's about the growth. Same thing in the intellectual area. I've covered all of Mishnayot Seder Moed. I know it. Good. Now I'm going to set the next threshold for myself. How am I going to get there? I know none of the young ladies my age, for example, are doing X, but I want to do it. I want to study it. Great possibility. Seemingly unrealistic. Let me go there. This is who we are as a people. This is that when we say we believe in God and we believe in life, and the belief in God is in action, this is what we're talking about. This is what we need to have in our lives. So, you are living as young men and women in what I and many people believe is the greatest period in Jewish history, truly. We have come through the most horrific catastrophe in Jewish and world history. 100 million people dead within 20 years, all at the design of man. Who would have imagined such a horrific world to live in? The sources of horror and terror are growing every day, becoming more powerful. But that means that the sources of good, that the Geulah, that the final redemption, that the great, truest expression of the Jewish people is also growing more pronounced every day, and it is. For the first time in history, well, first time since maybe the time of David, or maybe even further back, the time of Yoshua, we have a situation where we have Kol Yaakov and a Yad of Esav, meaning that we can compete intellectually, spiritually, and practically, and outdo just about everyone on the planet. That positive reality can touch each of us if we commit to it. So, 5 immovable principles. Every Monday morning, take a minute or two, read them. Remind yourself of who you are.